responsibility for county council, city council, and everything. So if anybody has any doubt about what's the responsibility, it's all there on the Cambridge.gov.uk website.
That's very useful. Right, let's move on to another topic, housing. This questioner is Martin, I think. Cambridge suffers a huge housing crisis because over decades national government has failed to, put here, level up the north. What would the candidates do about the housing crisis? What is your record on this? Let's start with John on this one. Go through the question again for you. Cambridge suffers a huge housing crisis. I think so many places do. It just does seem bad here. Over decades, national government has failed to do the levelling up, to use a modern phrase. What would the candidates do about the housing crisis? Quite simply, how do we get solve housing problems in Cambridge and our city?
May I just add, I'd be interested to know whether the candidates also oppose right to buy, so I meant to include that in my question.
Okay, so I guess we're kind of stuck with right to buy, or are we? I don't know. Go ahead and give us your views.
Right, well, I'll just try and say a few words. Clearly Cambridge is under an excessive amount of pressure in terms of providing homes for people, homes for everybody that needs them.
Sorry, could you please use the microphone?
Yeah, I'll hear you. Yes. Yeah, sorry about that. But I think I mentioned earlier that one thing we need to do is take care of the housing stock that we're already responsible for, to make sure the maintenance and repairs are done, and they're done in as timely and effective way as possible. There are opportunities for increasing the housing in Cambridge, for example, the development at the airport, so there will be new housing. Of course, when the new houses are built, we need to make sure that there is also water supply for these houses. It's very important. And in terms of the planning permissions and control, we need to make sure that when housing is built, the schools are also in place and the supermarkets are in place, so the infrastructure around the housing is dealt with. I feel in Cambridge it's always going to be responding to a pressure that's going to be hard to keep up with, but I think those keeping control of the planning and doing things effectively is what the council needs to do.
Okay, thank you very much. William, your view on this?
Well, you know, I don't know enough about this area to really give a proper answer to you, I'm afraid. But I mean, I'm happy to learn. And there's a lot of areas, you know, in local government where you would have to just say, what is it that you want, or how is it that we can help you, and then learn and try to understand what it is that the council needs to do, and hopefully maybe facilitate that, you know. I
think we need to straightforward. It's a lack of housing for people.
Well, this is it. But I mean, it's a very what do you want? How are you going to just suddenly make loads of new houses? Like you said it yourself, there's a water shortage issue. Cambridge is already straining under the amount of people who live here as it is. You know, we were talking about the state of the roads and the congestion and things like that. So it doesn't really strike me that you can't just suddenly make new houses. Although I would say, just from a personal sort of opinion, I would like to see more dilapidated buildings refurbished before new ones are built. But not that, like I say, not that I have any strong views on this area myself, but I'm happy to take it all on board.
Okay, Dave, what the council's record? There have been a number of new build council homes, but doesn't seem to be enough.
Well, how do you catch up? We are the second largest builder of council homes in the country after Birmingham. We built, or have in the pipeline, 700 council homes. Now, this is the first time that the City Council have been involved in building wholesale amounts of homes for council use in decades. So we're doing our very best. We've responded to this. We bought the Ridgeon site, interestingly. When it went on the market, I rang up and I was part of that discussion to actually buy the Ridgeon site to build homes on it for people in Cambridge and elsewhere. I resent the remark about the marketing these homes to foreign people, whoever they might be.
Well, in the Far East and from Hong Kong.
Yeah, that's right. And Hong Kong people, a lot of Hong Kong people have British passports. So is it because they're from Hong Kong, or is it because it was in Hong Kong? And the marketing, there were some homes sold to those people, yes, and they came to Britain and they lived in them. They were escaping the Chinese regime. But I resent the remark about talking like that because I think that's racist. Oh, okay, don't agree with me. You don't have to. So don't vote for me if you don't like it. I will stand up against that sort of thing all the time. But there are 140 new homes on the Ridgeon site which are used for council purposes.
And what if in a few years' time those people use the right to buy scheme?
Well, that's a Tory scheme. It's not a scheme that I support in any way, shape or form. It has been the worst thing for Cambridge in regards to housing, for people to be able to buy their council houses. Otherwise we wouldn't have this shortage. We wouldn't have this shortage.
What about if they can't afford to buy a house? I'm going to tell you, I bought my council house because it was the only way I could afford to buy a house.
Yeah, but the house was built for people.
I
Anyway,
was a council tenant,
yeah.
so I would have
But the
stayed
house
there.
was built by the council for council house home use.
I was a council house owner, so I just continued. The only difference was I own it.
Yeah, but the thing is, so you didn't, the money that you bought that home with didn't go back to the council, it went into the government coffers. So we weren't able to rebuild.
What's it like when a house is sold? How much of the receipt does the city council get from that?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Not at
So
all.
it goes to the government. Now some of that is beginning to feed its way back.
That's what I thought.
But we have lost, I think it's 2,000 council homes in Cambridge. And we haven't had the money to replace them. We're now on a project. We have a scheme that is sort of working quite well. It's a bit of a mix of capitalism and socialism. But that's the way of our world at the moment. But that we are upwards of 700 council homes being built in the last, I think it's the last 5 years. And that is the second highest in this country. Well, that is unbelievable. In this austerity times, we're actually rising to the occasion. And this is a city council issue. I'm sorry you don't know anything about it, but this is something that is a city council issue.
Okay, thank you very much. Where are we going to get more housing for people in Cambridge?
On a personal note, I always find it difficult when you see these big developments going on. Who benefits from it, really? I don't see the people of Cambridge benefiting very much from these enormous developments that are going on. That's just my personal view. I think having affordable social rent availability for people needs to be increased. You know, the ridiculous cost for people, month on month, from their paycheck, just to be able to have a roof over their head is ridiculous. And that needs to change a lot. Because, I mentioned before, it's the people who help Cambridge be Cambridge that are the key people to look after. People, you know, the people who leave the rubbish, the dust drivers, all those people who probably can't live in Cambridge because of the cost of housing, have their own house, have to move. I remember it's 20 years ago now, somebody travelling in from Chatteris to work with the city council. Why isn't there provision for city council workers to live in their workplace? That is a shocking situation, because why do people, it's not a privilege to have to travel down from Chatteris to work in Cambridge. It should be a right to be able to live where you work. That's one of the issues why people have to drive till they get to their place of work, because they can't afford to live where they live. Afford to live where they work. And that's a really key fundamental issue which needs to be talked about and sorted out in an independent way. Not allowing people who think they know the right answers. We need to allow citizens to choose what needs to happen in their region. Citizens' assemblies is a key thing. Allowing local people to make those decisions that affect them.
And just out of interest, on the point of the sale of council houses, where do we stand on that?
I live in an ex-council house, so I find it was horrendous that none of the money that was taken for those houses.
So you
went
bought
back
the
to-
house from somebody else?
No,
You
no, yeah,
bought,
well, it was sold about 30 years ago. Bought
Okay.
from the council about 30 years ago, but that money disappeared, like I said, into the government's coffers, and that should have been invested in new housing.
Yeah.
It is ridiculous.
I can see arms waving. I'll come to you in a moment. Just to finish off the round, I'll go with thank you, Ian. We'll go with Zachary first, then I'll take some points from the floor again.
Just remind myself of the
Mind
question.
of the question. Cambridge suffers a huge housing crisis. Over decades, national government has failed to level up.
Yeah, so the key thing is we obviously need more housing in Cambridge. The demand in this city, it's a really dynamic city. We're very, very lucky, as we said, it's one of the most rapidly growing cities in the country. We've got real economic dynamism here. We need more housing. We need housing that addresses our specific challenges that are unique to Cambridge. We have a very transient population. We have lots of people who come here for short periods of time, who need a dynamic housing market that caters to their needs. We've also got a lot of people who are coming here to work in the really exciting, innovative industries that we're growing here in Cambridge, often fresh out of university, not far beyond that, who need the kind of homes that suit them as they begin their lives and grow into young families, and we're not meeting those needs. So what the Conservatives said throughout this election in our manifesto is that what we want is more housing of the right kind in the right places. So what does that actually look like? Well, first of all, we need to make sure that we've got the basics right. And we've talked a little bit about water, but we haven't talked enough about water tonight. We can't build anything else in this city. I hope we can build the Cancer Research Hospital, because that's going to be fundamental to the care that we can get in the city. But everything else needs to be put on pause until we get the water solved. And I'm glad that one of the few things that might be coming down the pipeline that is positive as a result of going forward is that we're going to get those reservoirs built that will solve our water crisis in this county. We also then need to solve the problems around infrastructure. And we need to make sure, as was mentioned by the previous speaker, that we have the schools and the GPs present to support those communities. So that's got to be done first. The other thing we need to make sure is that the housing is built in the right places. I've been spending a lot of time in King's Hedges recently, and one of the things I find remarkable, and I'm not knocking the City Council's record on social housing, but I thought it was really appalling if you go somewhere like Arundel Close or Saxville Close. These are people who've never been there before, communities that are basically built around greens that the council own, and the council decided, God, we want to hit our council house target, we're going to rip up those greens and we're going to stick huge developments on them. And overnight the green space in those communities has disappeared. I don't think that's fair to anybody. And I think when we're talking about getting development in the right places, we need to talk about purpose-built communities that develop place rather than just shoving houses in left, right and centre.
And is the
and
right,
overwhelming
is the right organisation to do that? Is that a city council? Is that a development corporation orchestrated by Michael Gove or whoever the housing secretary is in 12 months?
You're putting me on the spot here. I think that what's really important is that we need to have local engagement. And I think it's vital that the next step in this proposal is to come and spend substantive time talking to the people of Cambridge. And the local party has been very, very clear that that's got to be the next step. And we hope that these proposals, which we believe will do, substantially evolve before any shovels hit the ground. And we don't think that anything like the numbers that are being thrown around will be what is ultimately delivered in this city.
Do you think there'd have been more engagement if, say, there'd been I know this is difficult to believe to some people, if there'd have been a Conservative City Council, do you think that there'd have been more contact with Mr Gove and the City Council?
I think that's too simplistic. I think one of the things we're dealing with at a national level, I think it goes beyond the scope of this election, is the fact that the planning laws in this country are too restrictive. And I think one of the reasons that this particular initiative has been pushed forward is because the government has, I think, rightly identified that it's only from the top at the moment that development on the scale can happen. My personal view, and I say this as an individual, would be that we reform those planning laws so we can have meaningful development that is community driven from the bottom up. And I think that is the future in this country, and I hope we'll see some regulation change towards the end of this Parliament. Just touching on two final points we made. First of all, with right to buy. I understand the argument. I think it's a very difficult argument on all sides. I think Roy actually made an excellent point here, which is that I speak to residents over and over again when I'm out knocking on doors who say, you know what, I wouldn't own the house I live in now where I've raised my kids if it hadn't been for the right to buy scheme. And while I also understand the issues around housing stock and the problems that's caused, I think it is a fundamental moral good that there are millions of individuals in this country who now own their own homes because of that policy. And I am very, very clear that any solution that comes to housing should not involve denying the opportunity to own your home to future generations. I think we can't offer house ownership and home ownership on different terms to those we offered to previous generations. The final thing I'll say, which I did not take very kindly to being racist by Dave, is that it's very, very, very different. And I think it's actually kind of disingenuous and borderline misleading to suggest that this has got anything to do with the refugee status of many people who came from Hong Kong, and the government made absolutely the right decision to extend a very generous visa scheme. In that particular scenario, chatting with Ironworks and Timberworks, these properties were marketed